Is that you on, Kugan?
Hello, am I on?
Fucking hell, it's him.
Alright, mate. Is that you right, Kugan, is it?
Yeah, it took me fucking ages to get on it.
Oh, that's him. How you doing, mate?
Alright.
Aye, good to have you on. I was actually wanting to get you on another time, actually, so we could actually get a longer time, because we're running at almost, 2 hours, just about?
Yeah.
Listen, I've been listening to this for about 20 minutes, and whoever's talking, there's some quite sensible stuff, but whoever's writing, all the people writing on that conversation thing, fucking hell.
That's the listeners,
We
mate.
don't control the chatter.
That's what I was reading, and I was like, I'm going to go on here and get absolutely fucking slated, but, you know.
Well, you will get some people on the chatting away and stuff, talking. Well, some will talk shit, some will just troll, etc. Anyway, mates. First off the bat, is that card in Liverpool pay-per-view worthy?
Listen, I said the same thing to someone on Twitter the other day. I feel that for this to have been a pay-per-view card, it could have done with another fight that was the similar level to Cleverly and Bellew, at the very least. So whether that was a quick Galahad, I don't know, a fight that was on that sort of level to sort of call it a pay-per-view thing. But you got to realise, like, it's not my job to sort of keep moaning about the pay-per-view thing. Like, you know, I do understand all the gripes about pay-per-view. Like, don't think like I'm a complete idiot into thinking, oh, you know, but it's not my job to sort of go on there and keep on at him. I mean, I've spoke loads about pay-per-view with Eddie Hearn, and to be honest, he's going to say what he's going to say. It's his promotion, it's his card on the thing, so he's going to say it whether people like it or not. But it ain't... my views on it are really irrelevant, to be honest. Like, people asking me, I get tweeted about pay-per-view every fucking day. Every time I check a tweet, if I've tweeted about the football, someone will involve pay-per-view in it. If I've tweeted about I've gone to the fucking toilet, someone will tweet me about pay-per-view. And it's every fucking day. Is this going to happen every day leading up to the 22nd?
It's going to happen, mate. I'm telling you, people are pissed.
It will.
People are pissed.
What are they saying to you, Kugan? What are they saying to you?
Well, like I said, listen, the original talk about pay-per-view was always this. It was always, pay-per-view can only happen if it means that show or that fight wouldn't go ahead unless it's pay-per-view. That's what Eddie Hearn has always said. Now, what you ask yourself is, would this card have gone ahead without the money from pay-per-view? I don't know.
But Kugan, this is Rob Palmer here. Sorry to interrupt, but don't you think they could have spread this card? You could have spread 4 or 5 of these fights across other cards and actually massively improved the Sky product.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But it's just, listen, to be honest, it's not. I mean, it's Eddie because he's at the forefront of everything. But Sky obviously want to be putting on pay-per-view events to everyone's dislike, unless it's something which they think's worth putting pay-per-view on for. But a card with all their names on it, I suppose that's the way it's being justified as a pay-per-view. If you're looking at it from what everyone else is looking at it, how many 50-50 fights, which seems to be the main gripe about it, how many 50-50 fights are generally on the bill? Well, probably not more than 2 or 3 at tops. So
I'd say only 1, to be honest.
Well, I made this point earlier. You know, we know Groves is getting a massive payday for this. He's on really good money. Why couldn't they use the money that they're going to be paying Groves to put in, you know, better opposition with the other guys on?
He's not even a matchroom fighter, is he?
Well, no.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Groves to Gal thing's a bit. That's not clear cut because Groves and DeGale are both mandatory for separate world titles. They're not going to be in massive fights on this bill, are they? Let's have it right. DeGale's, I mean, Perryban's credible. Groves' opponent, not so much, but they're never going to be in huge fights on the 22nd when, you know, they're sitting there mandatory for titles. So
the thing is, you got McDonald fighting a flyweight. This guy that they've got in for Scott Quigg, Quigg will smash him in 2-3 rounds. He's not that good. The last fight, a shingle weight, was a much better fighter than this Otka guy they're bringing in. Yeah, you just need to look at the betting odds. You know, the betting odds say it all. You know, it's not a competitive card.
It's not about. It doesn't really matter that no one takes issue with Groves having an easy fight, or nobody has an issue with the Gale fight in Periban. The issue is that they're taking a bullshit product and putting it on pay-per-view. And I know what you said in your tweet the other day about it's only 15 quid, and if you don't want it, don't pay for it. But people pay for Sky Sports every month.
I pay for it. Listen, my Sky bill's fucking 90 quid a month. Listen, I buy it. Up until I was doing IFL TV, I bought every pay-per-view since I was about 18. I bought every pay-per-view. But now I don't buy the pay-per-view because I'm at the show, so it's different. Yeah. But listen, I completely understand like why people are moaning about it. And I think, deep down, Eddie Hearn probably understands why people are moaning about it. But, listen.
Kugan, he said, for instance, this fight couldn't be, the Bellew Cleveland fight couldn't be made without pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Can you expand on why he said that? Did he actually explain to you why it needs to be a pay-per-view, that fight?
Right, so Eddie Hearn says that Cleverly Bellew isn't a pay-per-view fight, right? He said that. It's not on its own a pay-per-view fight. Eddie Hearn's argument is, and like I said, I'm not saying he's right or wrong with it, I'm just saying this is what Eddie Hearn says. He says it's the card. Now, so you forget about Bellew Cleverly for the minute and all the attention, because no one's even talked for the last, since it's been announced as pay-per-view, hardly anyone's talking about Cleverly and Bellew. They're all talking about the fucking undercard, whether, being pay-per-view. But don't forget, last year, Froch Groves, the first one, everyone, I'm not saying it was to the level of this, but were moaning about whether that fight itself was pay-per-view. And after the fight happened, no one really said anything, and they sort of took it for granted that a rematch would be pay-per-view. But beforehand, I don't know who remembers, but I remember it, for the first fight in November, loads of people were saying, hang on, this fight ain't pay-per-view. This is a domestic fight, blah, 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 even though it's for world titles. We're saying that it weren't pay-per-view.
It's because Eddie, on your interviews, promised a monster undercard. Those were his words.
Yeah,
and then he didn't deliver that. That's the issue that I think with fans like myself and others have, is that we've constantly been promised these things via your interviews. And I think you do an amazing job for British boxing, Kugan. But in these interviews, Hearn promises big things, and he's just not delivering on them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. What are you talking about? The shows in general, or are you talking about pay-per-view?
I'm talking about the shows in general. I think in the first sort of 2 years that Eddie Hearn came into the game, the stuff he was doing was fantastic, and since then it's really slipped off. Things haven't progressed. If anything, they've gone backwards. And the reason for that, I think they're just hungry for these pay-per-views. They're just trying to, and this isn't a real pay-per-view. This is just microwaved stuff. They've just slung it all together. They've talked about Bellew v Cleverly's not a pay-per-view card. It's got to have a great undercard on it. Well, this isn't a great undercard. It's just a bunch of showcase fights. And then when you go on to regular Sky Sports, you got Brian Rose against a nobody. You got Callum Smith against a nobody. How's that going to grow the sport? Honestly, to grow the sport, you've got to take these casual fans that show up to one show a year and buy one pay-per-view a year and get them to be people that are going to be watching Sky Sports every single week. Get them to be people that are going to be going to 3 or 4 shows a year like the guys that are calling into this show do. And you're not going to do that. We fell in love with the sport watching Ben Eubank. We fell in love watching Macklin against Moore, not watching Ricky Burns steamroll some bloke from Latvia or Argentina in one round.
Ricky Burns isn't steamrolling anybody right now.
You know what I mean? That's what people are sick of. It's just, we were promised that we were going to start, when Matchroom got the exclusive deal with Sky, that we was going to get more 50-50 fights.
Adam Smith promised that,
exactly.
Actually.
Not as many, and that pay-per-views would only happen when it's a necessity, and that the undercards for those pay-per-views would be stacked. None of those things have happened. The product is mildly better than it was before.
I think we really should be. I think we really should be talking to Eddie about this, and maybe Kugan's only the best person.
Yeah, listen. Effectively, I'm the same as you, except that I'm like the middle person in between who brings you his views or his thoughts or his opinions to you. That's all. Like, I don't have any interest in like financial gain or sort of whatever in Sky or whatever. We do our stuff on Box Nation, but I don't have any like. People go on about, like, I wrote that tweet yesterday, right? So my tweet yesterday was people going on about pay-per-view like it's like a mandatory. It comes out their account. And people going to me, oh, you're missing the point. I'm not missing the point. I completely understand the point. But people are moaning to me about pay-per-view, and I know why they're doing it, because they moan at Eddie, don't get a response. It's like, the next best thing, I will moan to him, because maybe he'll bring it up in an interview. But, I mean, listen, I hear it all the time I read it all the time on Twitter from that side. I don't know listen, Eddie Hearn's a promoter. He's got to sell that show on the 22nd, regardless of what happens. So, I don't know why people are ultimately that surprised about him pushing the show, blah, 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 blah. So, he's a promoter at the end of the day. He's the same as Frank Warren, same as anyone. Listen, Frank Warren's selling this card on the 29th, which is a great card. We know that Billy Joe Saunders and Chris Eubank is the marquee fight of the bill. You ask Frank Warren, he says that Chisora Fury is. Now, in Frank Warren's head, he surely doesn't believe that the hype round Saunders Eubank is that to what Chisora Fury will be on the 29th, because it's not. But Frank's still saying that the big fight on the bill isn't Saunders Eubank. He's saying that it's Chisora Fury. But he's going to say that because that is to him the big fight on the bill, because that's probably what's costing the most money. So I don't know why people are ultimately surprised about promoters bigging up their show. What's he going to come and do, Eddie Hearn? Is he going to come out and go, no, actually, this isn't. I'm selling this as a pay-per-view card, but it's actually not a pay-per-view card. Listen, I understand. If he really thinks about the show, I don't know. Whether he's entirely satisfied with it, I don't know.
I understand he's got a job of a promoter and he's got to sell things, but it's the lies. It's making us charge more. He's saying, we're going to put this on the card. We're going to put Quigg against this opponent on the card. We're going to give it a stacked undercard. But it's not these things. Frank Warren can lie and say, Tyson Fury, Chisora's the lead event. But we're still getting these good fights. What Hearn's telling us is we're getting these, we're going to get this A fighter, B fighter, C fighter, and we're getting XYZ fighter instead. And it's
I understand that. I understand that.
And people are pissed off with it because they keep saying, we're going to definitely get this title fight over here. We're going to get this fighter for Crawler. We're going to get this fighter for Quigg. And this is why people get irate with it. And I think Hearn definitely gets more stick because he's more in the public eye now. He's the one that's wanting to be out there on Twitter more. He's trying to engage with the fans a bit more. It's a good idea. But by putting himself out there, he's going to be open to this stick, especially when he's not delivering on the things that he's promising us.
Just stepping away from what someone said. Who was it that said about the show, forgetting about pay-per-view for a sec, the shows in general. I mean, listen, they put on...
That was me.
Right, they put on... Matchroom put on in excess of 20 shows a year, which is great, alright? There's not going to be a banger every week. Like, every show isn't going to be a banger. But, I mean, look, the show in Hull the other day, right? I mean, I don't know I haven't listened to what you think about it, but they were matched well. Like, the three top fights, they were matched reasonably well. I mean...
I would say this year that the whole show was good and the Manchester show was good, but if you look at the London card, Ryder's opponent, why is that sort of fight on TV? If you look at the Leeds card, the Burns fight, the Rose fight, the fight with, what's his name, Callum Smith, those fights shouldn't be on TV. That's the sort of fights that we were told would be on Fight Pass and wouldn't be on regular Sky anymore. And if you'd taken a fighter like Jamie McDonnell and put him on that Leeds card, if you'd taken James DeGale and Periban and put that on the London card, all of a sudden, you've got good shows.
Can I just stop you there, right? Right, listen. Ricky Burns, Callum Smith and Brian Rose are very unlikely to fight on Fight Pass. So I don't know I don't believe Eddie Hearn's ever said that them fighters are going to be on Fight Pass. Callum Smith's one of his best prospects. Ricky Burns is a two-weight world champion. Brian Rose is a world title talent. Regardless of whatever, they're still, what I've just said is true. They're not going to be fighting on Fight Pass. They are going to be on Sky, like fight night shows. So,
but not all on the same card, surely. If they're going to be fighting tune-ups, if they're going to be all fighting tune-ups, or they're going to be, coming back from their world title losses or rebuilding, don't put them all on the same card. We don't want to see that. Spread them out.
I think the thing that most people is it's always these undercards. They're always showcase fights. George Groves against nobody, James DeGale against nobody, Scott Quigley against nobody. You can understand we get somebody like Callum Smith who's still a prospect having fights like that, but there should be, at the top of the ball, there should be a lot more competitive fights, and the mismatch room names ringing through just now because it just isn't happening.
Do you know what? It's kind of like, listen, the excessive shows, I just know that there's not going to be. I agree, sort of. All right, so if you've got 20 shows in a year, I would say at least 15 of those shows have to be some sort of on a competitive standard. Do you know what I mean? You've got to allow one in every 4 shows or something to be just to turn out the way it does.
I'd actually say it's more like 3 and 4 shows now that are being a dud. And I'm not just saying that as a whinging boxing fan, because actually I backed Matchroom for a long time and took a lot of stick over backing them. But the product just it's not good enough now. There's just too many mismatches, too many blokes coming over from Argentina. And then the main events aren't even what they're cracked up to be. And then when there are decent fights, they put them on pay-per-view. And with this card, they're putting crap fights on pay-per-view.
Kugan, is Eddie mentioned, or has there been any talk as to why Barney Francis has now had to get involved with this pay-per-view?
I don't really know a lot about the I know obviously Barney Francis has involvement in what goes on, and to be honest, the ultimate say does come from Barney Francis ahead of Eddie Hearn. So, like I said to you earlier on, it's like Eddie Hearn's like fronting it out as a promoter for Matchroom, and he's the one we listen to. We've never heard from Barney Francis talk about anything to do with pay-per-view. Do you know what? I'd love to fucking interview Barney Francis. It's like he's on my list with like Johnny Wish and Al Heyman. Barney Francis is one of them, because like Barney Francis is probably, I don't know, in a certain respect, probably better equipped to answer pay-per-view questions than Eddie Hearn is, in a way, because ultimately it does come from that. It does, he's the top man there, so it does ultimately, if Barney Francis says that this isn't a pay-per-view card and it won't be, then it won't be, regardless of whatever. So it does come down to the Sky thing, which is above Eddie Hearn, remember.
Coog, listen, we really appreciate you coming on. I mean, you're fronting up, as I says, some people are like, oh, he's going to duck and stuff like that. We're not going to abuse you in any sort of way, so don't worry about that. But on a light-hearted note, Rob's wanting his flag back from the Brook fight against Porter. Can you arrange for that to happen, mate?
Who's got that?
Eddie Hearn gave it to Kell Brook. He wants it signed and delivered back.
Let me give you some background, Kugan. I was at the show in Carson, and after the fight, I had a Union Jack with me. Hearn called for it to be thrown into the ring. Yeah. And then I spoke to him on Twitter after. He said to me, yeah, I'll get it back. I'll get it signed. Nothing. And now he's blocked me on Twitter.
What? Because you asked him
No. He's been giving him a lot of shit for the pay-per-view.
He's been blocked because he says he's going to watch our stream.
Yeah, you're calling him a cock and that. That's why he blocked it.
I still think he should send. He told me if I don't have the flag, I'll send you something better. But so far, nothing's come in the post, and I'm bitterly disappointed about it.
Unless Kell Brook took that flag to Tenerife with him, I'll ask him where it is. I mean,
he probably used it to wrap up his leg.
That flag could have saved Kell Brook's life.
It could have done. Do you know what?
If it's got stains on it, I'm happier.
I'd go right on eBay.
Do you know what? Just on another note, when I was reading that chat, right, and you can give me your opinion about this as well. So someone, I think it was Paul McAllister, was writing that we're pro Matchroom, right? Correct? So
he said that, yeah.
Right. So do you, whoever's online now, do you believe that we are pro Matchroom?
No, I don't believe that at all.
I believe that you're maybe just you're naturally more comfortable interviewing Eddie than you are maybe Frank Warren.
Yeah, I said that as well, Coog. I says the way you do the interview it probably gets more out of some people and stuff. I mean, I like the way you do your interviews. You kind of relaxed, lazy, so to speak. Kind of laid back, etc. The Adam Booth stuff's quite good as well. When you get him on, he takes the piss, etc. I just think you feel more comfortable with guys like that than you do with maybe guys like Frank Warren, for instance. Where somebody's got to watch what you're going to say to him.
Do you know what?
I personally believe. I personally believe, Kugan, that you actually ask Eddie harder questions than you ask Frank Warren. And actually, if you're biased towards anyone, it's towards people other than Matchroom. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, listen. When we started in 2010, nearly four years ago. I Film London, as it was known then, didn't get really going until sort of the middle of 2011. When we first started doing what we were doing, I don't know who was following us from back then, but we was accused. It wasn't as big as it was then because Twitter wasn't as big and the channel wasn't as big, but people were going to us, oh, you're Frank Warren people. All you do is Frank Warren stuff, because 2011, Frank Warren was putting on the best shows. Like, he put on DeGale Groves, he put on Cleverly Bellew, that the first fight. That year, Frank Warren was doing more stuff. The shift, I'm not saying in quality, I'm saying the shift in amount of shows since then has swung to Matchroom. They put on 20 shows a year. So common sense tells me that we're going to be spending more time around events, media days, whatever, around Matchroom. Plus, they've got the bigger stable. So, if Kelly Maloney come out tomorrow and announce a Sky deal,
she's already came out, mate.
I think so, yeah. If Kelly Maloney comes out tomorrow and took Eddie Hearn's Sky deal and had 20 dates, like between now and 12 months, we'd be wrapped around Kelly Maloney for the next year on a considerable time. It's not a case of, oh, we're pro this, pro that. Listen, when we announced that Box Nation thing, like, honestly, the amount of comments we got, like, oh, what's fucking Eddie going to say? It's nothing. What we do is nothing to do with Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, blah, blah, blah. We've got our thing that we will continue doing with IFL TV, and we will cover whoever's putting shows on, whether that's Hennessy, whether that's Kelly Maloney, whether that's Frank Warren, whoever. The Box Nation thing, like, come about, is a great thing for us to have half hour on air every week. But like people going to me, oh, isn't that going to upset? Like, people have come up to me and gone, oh, weren't Eddie happy about that? And I'm like, Eddie doesn't pay my bills. We get on, we've got a great relationship, and he helps me out in respect to travel and hotel expenses, which he's done for the last 3 years, which we're very grateful for. But we ultimately end up doing our own thing, because if I was in Eddie Hearn's pocket, would I go and do a half-hour slot on Box Nation's like TV every week? Probably not.
On that point, though, sorry to interrupt you, mate, but do you not feel you've got too much familiarity with Eddie then? Since he has helped you out with all these things, and you are, he is a good mate to you. Do you not feel that might impact some of your, a biased approach towards him? Do you not feel that because he's a mate, you might be a bit, soft on him? And that's what a lot of people believe is happening. You're giving him a bit more attention, you're having a bit of banter with him, and I know that's your style, but do you not see how some people would see that? You're good mates with him, and it's going to come across that you're actually just, giving him all the attention.
You can't have that both ways. And so 5 minutes ago, I asked Eddie Hearn harder questions and whatever, and then, but that doesn't work the other way then. I can't, be then accused of being, too mate with him. Listen, I get on with Eddie, and we have a rapport in interviews. I'm not going to apologise for that, and I'm not going to tone that down in any way, because regardless of whatever, listen, you see Eddie Hearn's interviews, he's watched more than the majority of his fighters. People want to watch Eddie Hearn's interviews than the majority of his fighters, with the exception of probably maybe if you get a great interview with Froch or Brook or one of the top names, it's people watch his interviews, mine and his interviews, more than they do the majority of the fighters. And that's on a show in, just normally or whatever. But I can't get accused of being too pally with him and then also asking him. Eddie Hearn has never said to me, I can't ask him a question. Do you know what I mean? He's never said to me, I've asked him stuff about pay-per-view, right? From the moment it was announced, I've asked him stuff about pay-per-view. I can't keep going on about pay-per-view in every interview. I like to, and because I know it gets watched, but I can't, every interview between now and the 22nd, I can't keep banging on about pay-per-view every time. He's kind of said what he said about it. People don't like it, but that's what he said about it. But from my point of view, I can't ask him constantly about pay-per-view. And I ask him stuff that he doesn't know about. You know them Q&A things we do? Yeah. He's never ever asked to look at the questions. Have you seen some of the questions that have been asked, I've picked out to ask him? They cunt him right off. Some geezer was actually literally basically calling Eddie Hearn a cunt. And I'm reading this out. Do you know how awkward this is? I'm sitting there, I'm going, Eddie Hearn, you fucking prick. Why have you done this? And I'm he's listening to it, and he doesn't say anything. He's well, they're not getting tickets for a start, but he'll answer whatever. He's such an open book. I'm trying to get that sort of same thing with Frank Warren in a way, but I don't interview Frank as frequent. I'm going to try and at least get to Warren's office at least once a month, because Frank, in the last 6 months, Frank has kind of adopted this approach of ask me anything. Yeah, I'll answer it. You might not like what he's going to say. You might not agree with what he's going to say. But Frank has, I've noticed this. Watch that last interview I did with him. I don't know if you've seen it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, like a year ago, I probably wouldn't have dreamed of asking him about this printing posters first, signing contracts after. I mean, I've never heard anyone ask him that, to be honest. Like, and I think I will ask him about it because so many people were talking about it on Twitter, especially around Saunders Eubank when the press conference happened and it come out that Eubank hadn't signed the contract. Leonard Bundu sending those tweets about the payment. I asked him about it. What is it that I'm not asking Frank Warren then? Because if there is something that's quite like topical, I have asked him about it, and I don't want. The problem is, obviously, we had a few issues, like legal issues, this time last year, and I don't really, it's not my job to really, really push people to the limit where it's the stuff I'm asking or suggesting is becoming liable. Like, I don't want to get into that. Like, we're trying to promote like boxing, and I don't want to get into certain topics that could imply me as being, like I said, slanderous, libelous, defamation, whatever. But I think if there's stuff out there, you tell me now, if there's something specifically that you'd ask Frank Warren, well, tell me, then I'll ask him. Like, I don't have a problem. Like, I'm not going to ask him silly things, like I'm talking silly things without talking about it. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to ask him really ridiculous things that people are just interested in. But if there's something that I need to ask Frank, I will ask him it.
Does he actually preview your questions, Cook, before you do it? Does he actually ask to see your questions before you ask them?
Well, I haven't done a Q&A with Frank Warren ever. So we've never been in that situation where the questions are written down. The questions I ask him, I don't go up, like the 45-minute interview I did with him the other day, I didn't go to him, oh, well, Frank, I'm going to talk about this, and this. He's become, just recently, like in the last sort of few months, become a little bit more of an open book, as in, come down to the office. His office is about 40 minutes from me. I'll drive down there, and it'll be just like, oh, the most he could ask is, what are we talking about today then? And I'll say, I'll give him rough outlines. I'll go, we'll talk about that Saunders Eubank, we'll talk about this. But Frank's never gone to me, has never said to me, you cannot ask me about that, or don't talk about that, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to ask him absolutely ridiculous things. Do you know what I mean? If I do, I'm going to look to do a Q&A with him. Probably the next time I go to the office, I'm going to look to do a Q&A with him. But again, I will ask him sensible questions that, if people are wondering, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, I had like 3,000 saying 800, however many emails from Eddie Hearn, and a lot of them are fucking ridiculous. Like, if you could, you have access to that inbox account and you read some of the things that people will ask Eddie Hearn. It's like, and I know I'll get that with Frank Warren as well. So I've got to be a little bit sensible about asking these questions, but I think that he's becoming more of a little bit of an open book. Like, ask him. Like, a year ago, like I said, I wouldn't have asked him about the Leonard Bundu thing. Leonard Bundu sending tweets about payment and things like that. I don't know, maybe a year ago, I probably would have thought, I don't really want to go into that territory. But I did. I asked him the other day, he said what he said, and that was that. So people don't like his response. As long as the question is being asked, I can't really do any more than that.
Why do you think that is, Kugan? Why do you think Frank's loosened up a bit lately?
I just think what you got to remember is the age gap between Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, right? Eddie Hearn has used Twitter, 200,000 followers to his advantage. Frank isn't even on Twitter, right? Like, the Frank Warren account has nothing to do with... When they send tweets, specific tweets to do with certain things, like they did with Peter Fury, that clip that went about of Peter Fury saying that the contract for Chisora Fury hadn't been signed. Yeah. There was a series of tweets that come from the Frank Warren Twitter. Now, Frank Warren has okayed them tweets to go on. Don't get me wrong. He's not going to... The people that work for Frank Warren are not just going to go, oh, we're just going to respond to this. They would obviously have... Common sense tells you Frank would have okayed them tweets to go on there. But I just think that recently I've just seen Frank just sort of half take a little bit more notice of the social media. Don't forget, he's been promoting for however many fucking years. Right, he'd sell out a show however many years ago, all the big fights that he's put on, without the aid of social media. Now social media is so big in the sport of boxing, it's like getting to grips with it. And look at and Eddie Hearn's like, he's embraced it because it's just, he's of a different generation. Oh, I don't know, but I think he's starting to sort of see more the relevance of social media, YouTube, and all these different things.
I think with Box Nation, they need the hardcore fans more than ever before, because we are the people that would subscribe to that channel. So he has had to embrace kind of speaking with fans.
But you've got Bunchy's doing that though for him, isn't he? With the Box Nation stuff.
Yeah.
He tweets a lot as well. Coogan, just before we let you go, mate, listen, I actually want to try and get you back on at some other point, because obviously this is a ball out the blue. I wasn't expecting you to come on, actually, so if I say fair play for you coming on and fronting up, but I was just a light-hearted question. Have you ever heard of the Bellew of the Week segment?
I heard about it on this like a little while ago, but I don't know what it is.
I was going to ask you if Tony Bellew actually knows anything about it, you know.
Can you just explain what it is first?
Basically, you know how Tony comes out with these kind of outlandish comments. He is quite funny with some of them, what he comes out with, but he does make grandiose, quite comments. So basically, what we do is we troll through some of the comments made during the week. For instance, funny comments,
Play him the intro,
outlandish comments and stuff like that. So we just kind of like make an award
by anyone in boxing.
By anyone in boxing. So we're making an award in his name and his honour. So we then give it to, I don't know, Frank Warren for saying this, or Eddie Hearn for saying that, or you for not asking the right question, or something like that, you know.
I think Kugan's won it about 3 or 4 times, hasn't he?
Kugan, I think you've won about 6 or 7 times, mate, actually.
For what questions? What questions? I think if you have nominated me for this award.
No, I'm joking. What's that fishing rod? Put it back. No, I'm joking, obviously. But I was just wondering if actually anybody knows, or if he's heard about it, you know.
No, well, I have heard about it now, and to be honest, what you can be assured, next time I interview Tony Bellew, I'll make him aware of it if he doesn't already know.
Ask him if he's got the Bellew of the Week.
You've got to play the intro for him, guys. You've got to play the intro before he goes.
Send it to him on Twitter.
I'll send it to him on Twitter, right? Because the thing is, I think what happened is, you did an interview with him, Coog, on Ringside. I forget what card it was for recently. What card was it? Anyway,
after he beat Brudov, I think.
It was the card when it was in Liverpool when Cleverly and Bellew both fought on the same bill.
No, it was ringside that day. He had the suit on because you were interviewing him at ringside with his suit on.
Yeah. So that was at
Cardiff, the Cardiff show.
Was Froch there as well?
I think he was. What happened was one of our listeners actually says to Tony Bellew about the Bellew of the Week segment. Apparently, he just got and walked away. So I'm beginning to think maybe he is aware of it or something, you know.
Do you know what? I don't know. Listen, I don't know. I know Bellew's Bellew, right? But Bellew's actually really all right. Out of all the boxers I know he says some things and he is how he is. But he's actually like, out of all the boxers that we've come across over the last 3 or 4 years, he is so, like, honestly, like, in Wales, it was like, when he done that presser, they kind of liked him. They didn't want to like him, but they kind of, like, took to him. He had so many, like, all the abuse he was sort of getting before from, like, the Welsh fans. He went on there and he had a bit of banter with one of Cleverly's lot, which was funny. And then afterwards, they was all like, he had more pictures done than, like, with Welsh fans than Cleverly did. It was like, honestly, I should have filmed it, really. He's actually all right, Bellew. I get on with Tony, but I think sometimes, don't get me wrong, he does come out with some stuff and he does say some things in interviews, of course, but
I think he wears his heart on his sleeve a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he seems like he's a very passionate guy about the sport, but he doesn't have to talk some shit.
But listen, from my point of view, I want more Tony Bellews I want more Audley Harrisons, more Tyson Furies, because
No more Audleys, please, man. That guy's a fraud, son. You can't have him back in the sport.
love
What?
Love Audley.
Blasphemy.
Alex.
Yes, he can.
He is
Nigu,
fucking awful.
never give up, Nigu.
How close? Kugan, how close was Audley versus Kimbo for this card? Because that would have made it pay-per-view work.
Do you know what? I don't think it was very. I think that Eddie toyed with the idea of possibly putting one of them on it, and I think the more realistic option would have been Audley, because I just think you get into a whole new world with Kimbo. I mean, listen, I would have loved to have just seen that just from just a curiosity point of view more than anything. But I don't really think Kimbo and Audley was really, really close to being made. I think it was just it got tweeted. People seemed to sort of jump on the bandwagon of it and thought, oh, this would be great. But I don't really think Eddie Hearn really seriously considered putting that. But Audley could still be on the bill. So
They've got that Wembley date set next year, so maybe that's where they're going to put it.
It'd be more competitive than half the cards that's on there already.
That is a fact.
do you know what with Audley? It's like, I don't know. Listen, I look at things a little bit differently. Like from a fan point of view, blah blah blah. I watch some of these things and I look at it from an interview point of view sometimes as well. Like, I like to interview Audley because I know that he I won't say he talks bollocks, but he's just like, after every defeat, it's kind of like, right, the journey again. I know people listen to it and go, oh, fucking hell, Audley, but I don't know. Them people in boxing like Bellew, Tyson, Audley, all them people. I just think they're whether people like them or not, they do bring more profile to the sport, whether you like it or not. So they do, and I just know from our view counter about what boxers are watched more than others. Sometimes with boxers, I've got to pick out a headline like a bit out of the ordinary to make people watch them, because they don't. Not every boxer has that sort of outgoing talk bollocks personality, but boxing ultimately with boxers is a selling sport. When you're talking in press conferences, they're trying to sell the fight or big the fight up, and it's no different from Eddie Hearn. So whether people like it or not, that's just how they are. But then you get the flip side of someone who's someone a little bit more quiet, like a Ricky Burns was saying, who's probably never trash talk in his life, in his career, never trash talk, but doesn't get the attention of other fighters because of their mouth. Look at Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury literally just talked himself into a £5 million payout with David Haye. Like, he's like, when I'm in America, do you know that's the only fighter they talk about? They ask me about, like, the other American, like, people that do the same stuff as me, and even like the higher people, the people that write for the papers there, they just ask me about Tyson Fury. They go, oh, that Tyson Fury, man, is he really crazy? I go, yeah, he is. He's exactly how he is how he is. They're so fascinated by Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury isn't on paper our best UK heavyweight, but he's probably the most talked about heavyweight. With David Haye off the scene, Tyson Fury's Britain's most talked about heavyweight.
What's the latest on David Haye? I know you interviewed him recently. What's happening there?
Do you know what? I don't know, because I interviewed him for about 25 minutes in Vegas, and David's very good at answering a question without really answering it.
Yeah,
He's
politician.
a clever guy. Yeah.
Yeah, so he got me talking for 25 minutes and didn't really. I mean, I wanted to know who he's training with. Is he split with Adam Booth? When's he coming back? Now, he managed to sort of pad that out for 25 minutes without actually giving me any sort of answer. You can pick bits out of his thing and come up to your own conclusion. But listen, I assume that it's too late for him to come back this year, because we're nearly in November now. Unless, he's not. I don't see him announcing a fight this year. He's meant to come back in October, November. That doesn't look likely now. But people thought he might have been the name on the 22nd card. How would that have sat if it was David Haye coming back on the pay-per-view card rather than George Grant?
It's all about the opponent. We don't care about these names. It's about actual fights that are competitive and mean something. You could have put Crawler against Mitchell or something like that, and I would have bought into it. But if David Haye against nobody, Groves against nobody, not interested. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that.
Yeah, and like I said, the money they're paying Groves, they could easily afford to pay for someone like Mitchell versus Crawler or something like that. So there's no excuse for it.
He's actually got a lot of work to do in order to try and regain the trust of the British boxing fans, because in that interview, Kugan, that he did with you, he kind of gave this kind of body expression that he just didn't give a fuck about the fans who forked out thousands of pounds worth of tickets and hotels, flights, travel, etc. Just that kind of body expression that says to me is, I don't give a fuck, really, you know. But I've got another question for you before I let you go, and I've got a request for you as well. Remember that interview you did with Kevin Johnson?
Yeah.
I want to see those pictures on your phone.
Do you know, I'll be honest with you, the picture, I'll tell you, it was of a girl called Katie Albert, who was she's an actress in America.
What kind of actress?
No. The normal actress. I'll tell you what, when I get off here, I'll post a picture of her on Twitter. I'll post the picture that he saw on Twitter. Like, that's the one that he was going on about. I don't really know that woman well. I've met her twice. I don't really know her that well, but I kind of, like, in the keeping of the interview, just like, was like, yeah, that's one of the girls I know, just talking bollocks, basically. But he seemed to like her, so.
He's quite engaging character, actually, like him.
Do you know what? That'd be a guy. Do you know what I was thinking? Like, was talking about Anthony Joshua. I think he needs someone like him.
Yeah.
Like,
someone to take him rounds.
Sherman Williams would take him rounds. I'll tell you what, put that to Eddie Hearn. Sherman the Tank Williams will take Joshua rounds, I believe. He's only been stopped twice. He's been beaten 12 times, but he's only been stopped twice.
Dominic Guin as well, he'd be a good one.
I think Anthony Joshua now, obviously he's fighting Sprott, and Sprott's like bang up for it. From what I heard the other day, he's like right up for it. I mean, we probably can assume what's going to happen, but
yeah, he's getting smashed.
I think his next fight now, first fight of the year, I think he's going to be fighting early next year. It has to be a round giver. Like, he has to be someone that's going to actually, if he does stop him, he's going to be impressive. Do you know what I mean? Like, if he stopped one of them opponents, like we just mentioned now, in the fashion that he has done, then you have to start looking at him and thinking, well, he's stopping people that don't ever get stopped. So, but he's had 9 fights. You know what I mean?
I think if anything, they're going to move. I'm worried that they'll move him too quick. That's what I'm worried about.
It's their own fault if they move him too quick because of the way they're hyping him up. Yeah, again, you've got the point of promoters have got to promote a fighter, but the way they're hyping him up, the way they're saying that he could beat Tyson Fury right now, he could beat Derek Chisora right now. Yeah, he's fighting Michael fucking Sprott on the pay-per-view in a couple of weeks. You know, people are going to get annoyed when he's constantly fighting these guys. And as you said, he needs to get rounds in early next year. He needs to really show that he can last a distance for a start, because when he gets up to that elite level and he's fighting these top guys, if he wants to fight the Klitschko's, yeah, he might bang Klitschko out in a round, but he needs to be prepared to go the distance. He needs to be prepared for these things. And I'm critical of Joshua because I want to see him succeed. I want to see him against all types of fighters, tall fighters, rangy fighters, little short guys, little, stocky guys, southpaws, orthodox. I want him to fight the lot so he's ready to become a really good champion.
Tony Thompson's your boy, isn't he?
Yeah, Tony Thompson. Yeah, get him over. He's not the same guy that beat David Price, though. I mean, he's since gone on to lose fights to Solis.
Plus, he's abused his wife as well, so he maybe...
Do you know what, though? To be fair, right, it is Sky and Eddie Hearn that do the hyping for Joshua. Like, he never hypes himself up.
He seems a nice kid,
Yeah. You listen to everything Anthony Joshua says. He's fight as it comes, whoever's put in front of him. But he doesn't hype himself up, like, at all. That's done by his promoters and Sky.
And Barry, did you see Barry's comments recently in the press? My God. Joseph Goebbels would be hard pressed to beat that.
What did he say?
He says he's got the right hand that Ernie Shavers. He's got the.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Did
Yeah.
you see that? Oh my God! You need to tell Barry that's deplorable.
It's true though. We said it on the pod after the fight, after Joshua's last fight. Eddie was in the ring and he was talking about this guy's going to be the undisputed champion or whatever. And he was, and I think Ed Robinson had mentioned that win had got him a ranking in one of the organisations. And Joshua was like, well, that's no, I don't concern myself with that. And so he seems he's level-headed. And like you said, he's his promoter doing it, and you just hope that he isn't saying too much before he's ready for it.
Yeah, I think the classic example is of, and it wasn't really like Frank Maloney doing it, but the David Price was literally billed as that is it. That's our future heavyweight champion and everything, and that ultimately is. I mean, that was a really bad year and really bad defeats for David Price, and we don't know whether David will ever come back from that. So the danger of overhyping someone, because David Price was not saying overhyped, but there was so much emphasis before that Thompson fight about David Price. It was a cert that he would knock out Tyson Fury in many people's eyes, and it changed very quickly. But I still think David Price. I don't think he's going to be the same fighter after those two, but I think that he will have something to offer, but I hope he comes back. I like David, he's alright.
He seems a nice guy. I followed him for the amateurs and I was quite vocal on Twitter about, I always thought Tyson Fury would beat him, and obviously he had been stopped a few times in amateurs. But what I like to see by heavyweight, you need to see a heavyweight hitting the chin. Joshua looks good, you can see he's going to be brilliant and that, but until he's 10 rounds and he's hit, you just don't know, do you?
No.
Same with any heavyweight.
But you listen, right, you compare this now, right? So we're talking about Joshua after 9 fights, right?
Yeah.
Right, so he's knocked out everyone within 3 rounds, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, look, you look on the flip side to Deontay Wilder, who's had 30 something.
Exactly. You're right.
And beating everyone within the 4 rounds. And the best opponent Deontay Wilder's faced is what? Malik Scott? Maybe?
Audley Harrison.
Or Audley, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, now, Wilder's next fight will probably be against Stavern. And the jump up in class between Stavern and everyone that he's fought is massive. Do you know what I mean? But that's 30 fights in. Do you know what I mean? We're talking about Joshua after 9 fights, step him up. Deontay Wilder, and listen, I don't know about Deontay Wilder. He's done what he's done in boxing, and people can say, oh, blah, 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 blah. We don't know about Deontay Wilder until he's in with, what is deemed as one of the top 5 heavyweights in the world. We don't know what he's going to be like. Listen, a good argument as well is like Kell Brook got to 30-odd fights, and he hadn't fought anyone on the level of Sean Porter at the time. And it's kind of like you get to a certain amount of fights and you think, you're thrusting these people in at the deep end. Do you know what I mean? Like, Kell hadn't faced a top 5 welterweight in his career, and then he went in against someone like the IBF champion without really that sort of preparation into that. And we didn't know about Kell Brook, whether he was going to go in there and fold, and it's the same with a lot of these fighters. But Joshua's had 9 fights. I don't really think that's the same. Like, he's had, he's been pro just over a year. He's had 9 fights in a year. So I don't think Baktov was the worst challenge for him in the world. It ended up being what it was. But I don't think on paper, beforehand, you look at some of the opponents that have gone the distance with Baktov and blah, blah, blah. I thought it was a half credible opponent for Joshua, but it didn't turn out that way. But for his 9th fight, I didn't think Baktov was completely ridiculous. Just because he's dismantled him in a couple of rounds, you can't just, turn around and go, oh, well, that was a mismatch, blah, 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 blah. But
again with Joshua, though, it's not the fact that he's, the level of opposition he's facing. I think that's fine, but it's the height that goes along with it. It's the style of fighter that he's fighting. It seems that all of the people he's fighting are at least 5 or 6 inches shorter than him. They're all either very intimidated by him or scared to throw a punch, or simply can't reach him to throw a punch. And I want him to fight a mixture of styles, even if it's down a level in skill terms. I wanted to see him fight a bloke who's 6'7", just like him. I want to see him fight a southpaw and see how he deals with these different troubles and different difficulties in his life. We say that he had a very short amateur career. He's only been a pro for a year, but if he wants to learn these things, he needs to learn how to fight these styles. He needs to deal with these things. And I personally don't believe blowing smoke up his ass the way Hearn's doing, saying that he's going to knock out Fury in 3 rounds and all this nonsense. Yeah, it appeals to the casuals, but it's not helping anyone. It's not helping him build up his career and become a better fighter.
Listen, let me just tell you, right? Eddie Hearn truly believes, this isn't just talk, truly believes that Anthony Joshua does beat Tyson Fury now. Then
make it happen.
But I know, but listen, it's kind of like, so this is what he says. He would beat him now, but in number of fights or being ready, he's not ready. Now, I don't completely understand that. I do understand it, I don't understand it. If you're ready for someone, you should be ready to fight them. But he's saying that he would beat them now, but he's not ready. But
I think I
do get that in a way.
No, I mean, listen, if he says he's going to beat him now, it means he thinks he's ready. I mean, there's a young Japanese fighter there. He just turned 21, and his 4th pro fight, he beat the record of another Japanese fighter to become world champion. If you're old enough or good enough, then you fucking get in there and you make the fight happen. I mean, it's one thing letting it marinate and all that sort of stuff, but if he says that fight, he can do it, move heaven and earth to make it. So I'll tell you one thing, that fight on the pay-per-view card, I would have paid for that if he had Fury and Joshua on that card in Liverpool. I would have paid for that.
Well, look at the likes of Rigondeaux and Lomachenko and Baturbiev as well as the Japanese guy you were saying. They're all getting stuck in there. If they're good enough, fucking do it. I understand that Joshua doesn't maybe have the amount of experience as them, but I countered that with what I was saying earlier. Get him in with fighters where he's going to learn the experience.
I saw about the money at the same time, though. These guys have not really got a following in that, so they're going to get matched hard early. Anthony Joshua's somebody they can build on, somebody they can push into, a big following in the future.
Joshua's mentality to his career so far, he keeps talking about these phases, and it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Look, by the end of the year, he would have had 10 fights, right? So that was his 10 opening fights, right? So now, next year, to be honest, the level of opposition and the different style of fighters he's got to face does have to change, and they probably will, to be honest. I think some of the opponents that, without mentioning any name, some of the opponents that Eddie Hearn has mentioned for his next fight next year, for the first one, I think that the opponents he's talking about will give Joshua rounds. Because you're talking about some of the people he's talking about don't get stopped at all. So I think next year, get his Sprott fight out of the way. People, saying about the Sprott fight. I think, to be honest, if Eddie Hearn wanted to see whether Sprott was still up for the fight after the Bacta fight. As far as I heard that Sprott is bang up for it, which he's going to be. He's bang up for that fight. So I think if Sprott didn't fancy it, he probably would have tried to have got him a more durable opponent or a different opponent. But I think count this year out, and then from next year see what he does with his opponents. I think you will see a change in style of fighter, and like I said, people that are going to give him rounds. I personally think you will see that next year, and I hope you do as well. We do, rather.
I hope we do as well. Like I said, I'm a fan of his. I like him. I like the fact that he's got this charisma about him, this confidence about him, and he looks good when he's fighting. He's banging these guys out, and he looks strong, and he's going to be popular.
Even that last fight.
So when you see somebody with the muscles, especially like heavyweight, though, can they go the rounds? That's
the thing.
You
need to put oxygen into those muscles.
He was talking in an interview, I think it was with Kugan. He was saying that he has dropped a bit of weight and dropped a bit of muscle mass recently, so it does seem there's something there aware of.
Yeah. Kugan, one last question, mate. I mean, we're running almost 3 hours here in the podcast, 11:15 at night. One last question before we let you go. Hopefully we can get you back on at some point as well. You worked security for Ricky Hatton, I believe, in the build-up to the Manny Pacquiao fight. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a killer.
Yeah. But are you the Sri Lankan Steven Seagal?
Apparently.
Yeah. What was it like? What was the atmosphere like in the build-up to that fight?
Funny enough, today, Ricky's got a new book coming out next year about, I'm not sure if it's about Las Vegas, but it's like stories from his life, and I think they're including like a segment of that through days in Las Vegas. And the guy who's writing the book, he sort of done an hour interview with me earlier on to put extracts from that in the book. So
Cookbook.
no,
The pub guide or something.
no. I think it's just stories. It's just like funny stories from Ricky Hatton's, like, you know, just
So like anecdotes and stuff.
anecdotes. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. But the Ricky Hatton thing. So I met Ricky in 2008. Just like quickly, I met him in 2008. I went out with Ricky a few times. Kind of ended up looking after Ricky a few times. Not from any sort of like violence or like angry people or anything. Just
Make sure he gets in the taxi at the end of the night, kind of thing.
yeah, pretty. And so I probably did that about 5 6 times in Bristol, in Manchester, in London, a few different times. And then about 2 months before he went out for camp to Vegas for the Pacquiao fight, which would have been 2009, early part 2009, he just asked me to come out there with him. And it weren't like, I bigged myself up as a like Hatton security, because why wouldn't I, for fuck's sake? Do you know what I mean? Like, do I want to be Ricky Hatton's driver? Do I want to be his lunch getter? No, I want to be his fucking security. Do you know what I mean? I want to be his Ricky Hatton's bodyguard. So that Ricky Hatton didn't go, oh, get Kugan because he's the best the best man for the job to look after me. He'll like keep me safe and all that. I went out there with him just to really like keep him company. He gets bored a lot of the time as well. He's out there on his own. There was only like about 3 or 4 of us out for about a month, and I was just with him all the time. That's all it was. I just, like I said, I just gave myself really the tagline of Ricky Hatton's whatever. I just made sure that, you know, he got to where he got and he had company, and just that was really what it was.
How was his mood when he started tapering down in the camp, Kugan? Did he give you an indication that he had overtrained or that for the fight?
Do you know what, the camp, like looking back on it now, or looking back at it after the actual camp had happened, like, I'd never been watched sparring at that level. Don't forget, all this stuff I'm doing now, I wasn't doing it back then. I'd know, you know, there was about an 18-month gap in between my stuff with Ricky and when we started doing the IFL London stuff. But I'd never seen sparring at that sort of elite level, and it, like, from the first week, I just, you know, listen, it's not my job to give opinions about whether Ricky's looking good on sparring. I was just there because I was there. I wasn't there to voice my opinion about anything to do with training or sparring. But that camp was just, the whole thing with Floyd Senior was just it was a nightmare. And then Ricky Hatton really produced very little good sparring sessions. I think.
Is this with Lara? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Eris Laney Lara, not really. I mean, this was like, what, 2009, 5 years ago now. And no one really, like, Lara was just sort of, wasn't really on the scene then. But he was getting the better of Ricky in sparring. And it was like, I was thinking, and I was watching sparring session. I watched every sparring session, like, throughout the camp. And I was thinking to myself, is this like, this ain't. I'm just watching it from like a fan point of view. This don't look right. And then there was all the problems with Floyd Senior, and funny enough, I was telling the fellow earlier on, like, Lee Beard was there, and
Lee's apparently trained him for most of that camp, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, Lee Beard was like really got Ricky through the camp, because the stuff with Floyd, like, didn't look like it was working out. So Lee and Ricky were sort of kind of doing their own thing as well on top of what he was doing with Floyd. So he was definitely, like, I'm not saying he was overtrained, but he felt like he was being overtrained by Floyd Senior, but then he was also doing stuff with Lee Beard, like, separate to the stuff with Floyd. And I remember having a conversation with Lee Beard, and I was talking to the guy who was writing this book earlier on. And 2 weeks before the fight, I was out with Lee, and Lee said to me, and I remember it word for word, he said, what do you think of, like, what you're watching of Ricky? And I said, well, listen, I ain't an expert. I'm just saying he don't look like he's sort of sparring particularly that well. He said, look, if I had my way, I would pull Ricky out of this fight now, because he's going to get knocked out, and he's going to get knocked out early. This is what Lee Beard said to me 2 weeks, and I was like, really? He was like, yeah. He said, if I listen, there's nothing wrong with Ricky. He's not like injured or nothing, so this is kind of irrelevant. But if I had my way, I would say to him, I would pull him out the fight because, believe me, Kugan, he's gonna get knocked out, and he's gonna get knocked out early. And he said this to me, and I was like, and then look, and he was bang on right with everything he said. He just said Ricky ain't in a good place. The camp has gone terribly bad, and ultimately ended up what we saw in 2 rounds. So
what was Senior doing?
Yeah.
What was he doing for most of that camp if it was just a complete disarray?
Do you know what it was? One of the main reasons why there was kind of a thing between Ricky and Floyd is because Floyd was late. Like, out of a week, I reckon Floyd was probably late to training, like 3 times in a week. And I'm not talking about 5-10 minutes. I'm talking hour, 2 hour. Honestly, it was quite, and it was happening regularly. And I remember there was one time where we used to watch the 24/7 program round Floyd Senior's house. So when it aired, we'd go round there and watch it. And there was one episode where, I don't know if you remember, but Floyd...
The fast food joint and that?
Yeah, going through the drive-through, right?
Yeah.
And so, bearing in mind, Ricky's reportedly paying Floyd in excess of $1 million, right? Now, it comes on, and the 24/7 try and make a little joke, not a joke out of it, but they're like, Floyd's late for training again. Floyd's going through the drive-through, and we're all watching that together. So they're thinking, like, we don't know that's why Floyd's late, because he's stopping at drive-thrus and shit like that. We don't know. I'm not saying that was every time. I'm just saying that was just that for that time. But it was really uncomfortable because we're Floyd's in here, Ray, Ricky, Matt, everyone's watching this episode in his house, and he's kind of driving through the drive-thru, and they're doing like a 3-4 minute thing on what he's ordering through the drive-thru. So.
I got the impression for that 24/7 that Floyd thought that it was really about him and Freddie Roach and their beef, you know. That's what I took for that.
Yeah, I mean that was ongoing throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Listen, you know what? Listen, Freddie's not as much as obviously Floyd, but you know what Floyd Senior is like. He's like, he
He's never seen a camera. He doesn't like because
he's just one of them trainers. It's like, he does what he does with his fighters, but then that camera side of it he's prone to. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying, I was in, funny enough today, I was talking to Tom Chaney, right, and because our Box Nation show this week is a second part to the trainers, and it's weird because you talk to certain trainers and they've got no agenda, or they've got no interest in interviews or being on top tables, and they've got no interest in it. When I was talking to John Pegg the other day,
Joe Gallagher's one of those.
Who's that?
Joe Gallagher's a bit like that. He's not interested in talking to anyone or promoting.
Listen, Joe is how Joe is. Like, we can't doubt that Joe's commitment and his hard work towards his fighters, because he is committed to his fighters. But Joe also likes to have his opinion, so that is what it is. But then I'm talking to John Pegg and like Tom Chaney today. And a lot of people don't know what these guys are. I doubt half the boxing fans, I'm not talking about hardcore boxing fans, I'm talking about just general boxing fans, would have a clue who Tom Chaney was. And I'm talking to them today, and it is refreshing. And John Pegg the other day, and because they're going to me like, they're just so out of the limelight, it's a joke. Like I said, and the work they do, especially John Pegg, he's so known within boxing circles, but no one really is, he's not known on any sort of outside of the hardcore boxing fans who John Pegg is or who Tom Chaney is. But, I mean, Floyd Senior is just one of... But it comes down to the American thing, isn't it? A lot of the American trainers are like that anyway. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that's how they are. So, But that whole camp was just... It was a bit surreal. The whole camp was just a bit surreal. And then after the knockout, I stayed in. I was meant to go home on a Sunday, bags were packed, and went up to say bye to Ricky in his apartment, and he's like, him and Jennifer are like, can you stay for an extra week? I'm like, bear in mind, I was going home, I've been away from my missus for like 7 weeks. I was like, I want to go home. And ended up staying in Vegas for another, I think it was 8 days. And like, listen, that's where I fucking earned my money, going out there with Ricky in that 8 days. My God. My God. Like, honestly, unless I've been out with Ricky before, but to actually be in a sort of looking after him capacity, like, he lost it for that week. And then that was the start of his whole depression thing, really, wasn't it, for the next however long? That was as a direct result of that Pacquiao defeat. He went off the rails. So it's a shame, really, because Hatton, like, the reason why we all love Hatton, and like, not even him in the ring, but just Hatton in general, why everyone loves Hatton, is his downfall at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of how he is. It's a shame.
Do you think he's a bit underrated now, Kugan, than what was at his prime?
Who, Ricky?
Yeah.
What? How do you mean? Mean?
Well, just see, like, you'll talk to fans and that, like, see, like, a fantasy fight, who would win, Ricky Hatton against Fighter X, and, I always think Ricky's a bit underrated now. I don't think he was ever a seen fighter after Costa Azul. I thought he struggled to do the rounds in that after that fight, but his prime, like, in that fight and before, I think he was a serious fighter, but
Kugan, sorry,
I
mate.
think he's become a bit of a joke.
Kugan, I think we'll need to get you back on, mate, because Mixler only allows us to record for 3 hours, so we're going to get kicked off shortly. But it's been really good having you on. Hopefully we can get you back on as well. Maybe it's, I don't know, next week sometime.
Yeah, that's fine. That's no problem. It's no problem.
Amazing stuff. Thanks,
Yeah,
Stu.
no worries,
Cheers,
mate.
mate. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
All the best, mate.
All right?
Cheers,
Cheers.
Kugan.
Mate.